Ooh, guys, it's back. It's back after 3 years. Here we talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the Apple TV Plus original series, Severance Season 2. This will talk about episode 1, which is called Hello, Miss Cobell, and is directed by Ben Stiller. Guys, it's been 3 years since the ending of the We Are, of course, season finale of Severance Season 1, which left off on a banger of an ending. I think I gave that episode a 10 or something close to that. It was a really good episode. It brought a lot to the forefront and asked a lot of questions on what was going to happen next. So here we are after much delay and, scripting problems and, of course, the, writer's strike and the strikes that happen. We finally have Severance Season 2 finally here. This episode, once again, is written by Dan Erickson, the creator, as well as Ben Stiller, who directs this episode. And it's just nice to have Severance come back because it's a very unique series. It's a unique television show, has unique characters, and it's a series that from the offset, the minute I started watching it, it became one of my favorite TV shows of all time, at least in the first season. But the question really honestly remains is how will season 2 progress the series? Will it continue its trajectory of being a very awesome TV show, a very unique TV show? How is it going to answer the questions of the first season? It basically is one of those series that has a lot of weight on its shoulders. Now it's very, very popular, has garnered a lot of Emmy nominations, has garnered a lot of critical acclaim. The second season, like a lot of second season shows that are fantastic, has a lot to live up to. It really does. So that's kind of where I lie. Now, I have seen the first 6 episodes of this series, just to make you aware, but I'm only going to talk about the first episode. I'm only going to go into details of the first episode, so I'm not going to talk about what happens like later on in the series. I do want to thank Apple TV for allowing me to watch the first 6 episodes because I was really excited. But I decided to watch the first 6 episodes like they gave us and then rewatch them so I can kind of get an idea of stuff I missed from the first watch because, Severance is a show that has a lot going into it. And so here we have the first episode. So I will rewatch the first episode. And I can honestly say that this episode is a welcome addition to the Severance series. Continues the tradition of the uniqueness, the mystery. It continues going forward, but it actually goes simplified back to what the first episode of the series did, which is just kind of not really ease us in, but kind of uniquely put us into the scenario back again after 3 years because 3 years is a long time for a show not to be on the air. So you may, like I had to go back and watch the first season just so I got myself up to date. I did the same thing with Squid Game, just so I can remember what's going on because when you get into this first episode, when Mark comes out of the elevator, he hears some, like, there's some blackness where we hear some of the original first episode or last episode of the last season. You're gonna forget stuff. You're gonna forget stuff about Mark and Helly and Irving and Dylan and Milchek and Miss Cobell. There's a lot of stuff that's gonna be missing that you're just gonna forget. So go back and watch the first season before watching the second season and at least the first episode of the second season because it's worth going back to check out because once again 3 years is a long time to forget stuff. But here we are, first episode. It opens up with, I think, one of the coolest openings of a show I've seen in quite a while. It opens up with, of course, Mark coming off the elevator, really disoriented. He doesn't know what's going on. He just knows of what happened in the first season. He runs down the hallway, and this is what I mean is what a really cool opening does is it creates a rather unique way of presenting things, of bringing us back into this world. And what this episode does when it starts out is Mark runs down the hallways of Lumen, the Severance floor. But the way the camera angles are placed, the way the camera follows Mark, the way the camera moves, it's a really fascinating kind of really cool look into what the budget has been made for this season, which is a higher budgeted thing. So like it's a virtual camera and you could tell there's a lot of green screen stuff being involved, but it really is a cool way to disorient the audience. It's a cool way to disorient Mark. He's going to places that he remembers, but in the process of everything, things are different. Like the meditation room's different. Like where macrodata of refinement is different. Everything is different about this, and it opens up the mystery of like what is going on. Well, we get our answer really quickly, and of course, we're introduced to 3 new people. We're introduced to Ali Shawkat's character, which is Gwendolyn. We're introduced to Bob Balaban, who's Mark W. We're introduced to Stefano Cariante, who of course plays Dario. And Mark is like, what is going on? And I really found this kind of cool because what Severance is able to do is instill an interesting era of mystery. Like, what is going on? Nobody knows what really is kind of taking place. All we know is Mark is back in Severance, or back in, of course, the Severance floor of Lumen. And there's these three new individuals. You know, I love Ali Shawkat. Bob Balaban's been around forever. I don't know much about Stefano Cariante, but he's, you know, pretty good in this episode. And what we learned and what's really interesting is Milchek is now in charge of the Severance floor. Of course, we know that Cobell was kind of kicked out. She was kind of thrown out because she had made like stupid mistakes. And of course, we're going to, you know, we'll learn later on what happens to Cobell because she's not in this episode, but she is in the credits. You know, you cannot not have Patricia Arquette not in this show. I love these characters because Bob Balaban's character is very much like a corporate individual. He very much loves this life. Ali Shawkat's like more of like the kind of like inquisitive individual. Stefano Caliente, Dario's character, is more just the kind of guy that's just there. He wants pens. He wants pens. He's just a corporate worker. And I love these three characters. I love the fact that, you know, they're in here. They're not working well with Mark. Mark S, not Mark W, Mark S, who of course is the Adam Scott character, really just wants his people back. He's like, where are they? And then Milchek comes in with the balloons. He gives the balloons, which is very Severance-like, with the, you know, the perks and stuff they give to, that feels very childlike, because the one thing that Severance does, and one thing it's really uniquely telling about, is the simple fact that these Severance workers, the ones that are the innies, are very childlike. They basically are born out of this drive to want to make money, this drive to want to like get rid of thoughts in their minds because of what we learned in the first season. So Balloons seems very at terms with what's going on in Severance, but I like what Milchek is here because there's an underlining air of like uncomfortability with Milchek, as there always has been. Now he's in charge, of course, the Severance floor. He explains that these individuals, you know, Dylan and Helly and Irving and Mark, were like considered the, you know, the four groups that kind of made out into the open and they became famous. There's a photograph, which is kind of funny. It's really just kind of a reintroduction to these characters and kind of the mystery of why Milchek is a Severance manager and why he's taking care of this floor and what are the differences. And, you know, Mark is just like, I want my people back. And he even gets to a point where he like runs out of the room and he talks to the board. It's really interesting. I really love it. And then we're introduced to Sarah Bach, who plays Miss Huang, or how you say her name. She's a really young girl in the show, and she's a supervisor. She's basically what Milchek was, and I love her character, especially in the first episode, and she gets better. I won't spoil it, but she definitely is someone you want to look out for. And she has this like era of just like what Milchek was like in the first season, where there's an underlining kind of villainy, like evilness underneath her, that kind of like sleaziness a little bit, but she has that kind of like very smart kid. She even talks about how she was like a crossing guard when they do the ball thing. And I love what they do with her character, because she's just like, she's an unknown at this point in this first episode. You don't really know much about her. She plays the little game thing, which very much feels like a kid thing, you know, with the Egan, like the little Egan thing, like the little you know, water thing or whatever. I like her character, especially in the first episode, because it's just so mysterious. Like, why is this kid here? Dylan even questions it. Mark W., who is the Bob Balaban character, goes, why are you a kid? And she goes, well, that's how I was born. I was born as a kid. I mean, it's a very unique approach to what Severance and Dan Erickson and this unique world of Severance is doing. And of course, Mark S., the Adam Scott character, is trying everything in his power to get his people back. He even tries to frame Mark W. by putting a little note in his jacket. I really like that idea of, like, you know, he's trying to frame Mark W., who is just a guy that was supposed to be permanently retired, but now kind of came back and he's appreciative of it. It's really interesting because it expands the scope of Severance, of Lumen, with the simple fact that there are many buildings, which we see in the, of course, the projector video footage that we see later on. And I appreciate that. I really like that. I really like these characters are very different from the ones we know from the show. What's really interesting is how these characters are kind of thrown out. They're just there as kind of a way to get Mark back to his people, his normal people. And I kind of appreciate that because it's a really unique idea of just, you bring these two individuals who are famous actors. Like I said, Stefano Cariente is somebody I don't know much about. So he's just kind of there. There's not much development with him, but there feels like there's could be, development with Ali Shawkat and of course Bob Balaban. But maybe once again, they're just brought in as individuals who are just kind of there to eventually be replaced halfway through the episode. But once again, I appreciate the moment. I appreciate the ball thing. I appreciate what Milicic is doing with the balloons. I appreciate how Mark tries to scam them. And it's just, there's a lot going in there. And then we lead into, Mark thinks he's going to be fired. He's put back on the elevator, which I do like the elevator moments because, Mark goes in the elevator. You see the transition happen, and then it happens again. He's back in Severance, back in Lumen, which shows you that we don't really see what happens after that. But I really like that idea. I really like the idea like when he leaves, when of course Milicic brings him back in the elevator, he comes back out. There's that painting on the wall which has the 4 head figures, and Egan's is like a bayonet or whatever, which is kind of an interesting. There's a couple things like the jar of pennies, which I noticed, which is very much a Severance thing, which is like why the jar of pennies are there. There's not really much. I'll tell you, there's not much later on that deals with that, but there's things in there that you could like pertain on what the pennies could be, or the idea of the mural, like the simple fact of like how Severance uses murals, and the 4 heads could be the 4 heads of the Severance crew, the Helly, and of course Irving and Dylan and Mark and stuff like that. But Mark comes out, and of course Dylan comes off the elevator, and then of course we hear the screaming and yelling of course Irving's character. He comes off, of course, the elevator as we hear him screaming for Bert. We have Helly eventually come off the elevator, and it's a really kind of fun take on like reintroducing these characters, because you're wondering through the first half of this episode if they're even going to come back in the first episode. And I think Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller they knew they had to get these characters back, and I think they did it in a very methodical, very interesting way, because you think you're going to be stuck with these 3 characters like the Ali Shawkat, Bab Balaban, and stuff like that. But no, they immediately bring them in halfway through the episode, or at least 14 to 20 minutes into the episode. But it brings us into reintroducing these characters, and how, though it seems like it's been 5 months, has it been really 5 months? What is going on? How is it playing out? What is Milicic not telling him? What is he telling him? It's a really interesting way, because they are the thing about Lumen and the thing about Severance. What it does really well is it learns how to manipulate these characters into believing that they have choice and they have free will. And it goes into that very Matrix thing that, of course, the Oracle and Neo talk about, is you're in this world that is controlled. And the same thing, I'm not going to spoiler Heretic, the control situation. Are these characters really at the mercy of Lumen and Severance? Are they under control? Because they take them to the break room, which now has, this projector, and we watch this really fun like claymation thing about Lumen and about the macro data 4 that broke out, and we see some really cool kind of visual work and stuff like that, and Lumen's like a talking building, which is really a lot of fun. But the choice that Milicic gives them is like, you don't have to stay, you can quote unquote leave if you want. And it's a mind game, it's a manipulation. It's what Severance is really good at doing. What Lumen is really good at doing is playing into the notion of, do these characters really want to leave? Are they really kind of happy where they're at? And though we hear about, Mark of course saw his wife, who's Miss Casey, of course, Bert, Irving saw Bert with, of course, his husband. And that really kind of breaks him. And there's some really cool, really sweet moments between Dylan and Irving, where you see Irving wants to leave because he just can't handle the fact that Irving on the outside can't have Bert, because Bert's a huge important part of his life and stuff like that. And he eventually makes the choice not to leave. But Dylan really is kind of an anchor point for Irving in this episode, and really shows how much he cares for Irving. Is like, don't do this. Bert wouldn't want you to do this. And I really love the confrontation before the escape, or the exit door, and leaving Irving there, because of course Dylan is taken to Milicic, which I'll talk about in a second. But I like this fact that the manipulative nature of Lumen and the Severance floor, and like they can make the choice, but are they really going to make that choice? As if you watch the episode, as you see later on. But it's a really intriguing thing. And once again, not if you haven't, like I said, unlike me, you haven't watched the next 5 episodes, so you don't know how it's going to lead. But just go knowing in that these ideas and ideologies could play out in a later thing, and the nature of like how Helly tells about the story about, you know, when she came out, of course she's lying, which is a really interesting thing. But she comes out and she tells, oh, well, I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment and I was wearing a t-shirt that had like save the earth, and there was a gardener, and of course Irving's like, a night gardener? Like, well, yeah, he probably had like 3 jobs or whatever, and like, you know, whatever. Irving doesn't really think about it, but the simple fact that Helly is making a lie. Why is she making that lie? What is the purpose of that lie? Think about Helly and like her nature of why is she lying? Like, why would, you know, especially from her character and what she witnessed in the end of the last season, why wouldn't she tell Mark about the situation? Is she trying to protect Mark? Is she trying to hide Mark from the situation that she is Egan's daughter? It's a really interesting kind of theory, and is one that you should definitely keep an eye out for. But with that said, it leads into kind of the nature of like Dylan is introduced to this room from Milchek, who like is allowing the innies to experience life outside with this room inside the building where they can bring the family of the Audis to see them. So there's a wall of memories. There's like projector stuff and like that. And it's, once again, it's manipulating the characters, if you think about it, into wanting to stay. So here we have Dylan, who knows that he has kids, knows he has a wife. He now, you know, Milchek tells him about the kids and about the wife. And so now he's maybe given the opportunity to meet his wife and children. I mean, it's really fascinating. It really is. It's a really unique approach to start out a season. You know, once again, like we go back to Dylan and Irving, he talks about the room that he saw the paintings of, the one that we saw Miss Casey go down in the elevator. I love the fact that, you know, the episode continues forward into the point where we see Helly and, you know, Mark talk, and it just leads into the kind of the end of this episode where, you know, Mark and Helly and Dylan and of course Irving go back to the computers and start working, and they've made the choice because they know the overarching idea of like, you know, what exactly is going to happen. So it's a really fascinating take, but I kind of found that concept of like the control of these individuals and stuff like that. So that's going to be a really interesting way the story plays out. I'm assuming, and it's a really good episode. I like the fact that they go back to their work. Mark seems happy, he seems content, and when he's walking, he's doing the computer thing with like the little numbers that freak him out and stuff like that. And then we see a shot of course, of Miss Casey against the screen, against the computer, and that's a really interesting thing. And it's really interesting that Mark has this like love interest in Hilly, but there's also Miss Casey there, his wife, actual wife, and there's a talk between Hilly and Mark about that, and I found that unique and interesting. But I like the fact that this episode does just enough, but doesn't go too far into the mix of like a lot. It allows this episode to breathe. Once again, there's 10 episodes instead of 9 episodes in this season, and I think once the story plays out, and once again, when we get to the end, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But once again, knowing what happens, I don't want to give away because I can't. But I just wanted to let you know that it is a fascinating season. Like the first 6 episodes, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because I think they're interesting. I think other episodes are better than other episodes, but we'll talk about it as it goes along. But for this first episode, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because it's unique, it's interesting, it brings us back really well into the world of Severance, and it adds an air of mystery that for you guys hopefully plays out pretty well. I think it does. I think when we get to like episode 4, I think it's a really fascinating episode. I think episode 6 is really interesting. I think these episodes are interesting. It opened up the world of Severance. You can definitely tell this is a bigger budgeted season. I think they spent like $200 million on it. It definitely shows, but it also has that air of like lower quality, like the idea of the simple fact that the hallways are all the same and the rooms are all the same and everything's all the same outside of the mysteries of what Lumen is. And I think this is a really good start for the next season of Severance. So 9 out of 10 for Severance season 2, which is now on Apple TV Plus. So we'll look forward to the next episode, which comes in a week. But yeah, thank you so much for watching my review of Severance season 2, episode 1, Hello, Miss Cabell, which I do like the fact that the computer still says hello, Miss Cabell, even though Milchick's like, change this thing. So I do appreciate that. But with that said, comments below of this review or this episode, the spoiler discussion. Let me know what you think of the episode. I'm not going to go into details of what happens next. If somebody spoils it, I can't change that. But in the comments below, what do you think of this first episode? What do you think is going to happen? Where do you think it's going to go? What do you think about Severance Season 2 coming back, or Severance coming back for a second season? So let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see on this video, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.